morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the theme of today's episode is directors. And if you watch this show regularly, you know how much it delights me to be able to have a themed episode, because putting these together is a little bit like playing cards. You never know what the movie news deck is going to deal out next. So if you can get 3 of a kind, it's pretty exciting. Of course, 4 of a kind is best if I can match the viewer question to the 3 stories of the day. But I got so many requests to cover the acquisition of legendary pictures by China that I was like, I can't skip that, but it doesn't fit my theme of the day, so I'm going to make it a viewer question because, again, I got so many requests to cover it. So I cheated a little, but I do love me a themed episode. So once again, the theme of today's episode is directors. And we're going to start out with something that started out very small as a story, but has picked up some momentum. And I don't know if you saw this. I saw this over the holidays. Someone started a petition, and they were like, let's ask Disney to fire Colin Trevorrow from directing episode 9, the director of Jurassic World, and have George Lucas take over. Apparently they're okay with Rian Johnson, or perhaps they realize that Rian Johnson is already filming. But they're like, okay, let's get George Lucas back in here for episode 9. And I was like, that's cute. You know, the dreaded cute way to describe something. But lo and behold, the thing hasn't gone away. And it's gotten more signatures. Still not anything where you're like doing a double take. But again, it's not going away, to the point that Colin Trevorrow has even commented on it, which I would have advised him not to do. But of course, Colin Trevorrow can't help himself, because he, of course, also got into a lot of trouble about female directors in blockbusters a couple of months ago, as you might recall. So I think that his management team should delete his social media. He actually, I don't know if he made this comment in social media, the second one about George Lucas. It might have been an interview or something, but I'd be like, hey, Colin, just be quiet and direct movies, right? Prove them wrong with your work. But episode 9 is a long ways off, and so I guess he's dreading the next couple of years where everyone's like, man, I wish Colin Trevorrow wasn't directing episode 9. It's funny because he did a really good job with Jurassic World. I mean, there were a lot of problems with Jurassic World, obviously, but I don't think they were from the directing standpoint, although he is a writer as well, and he is working on the script for episode 9, just as he did Jurassic World. But the movie did make $1.6 billion, and it's the one just recently unseated by Star Wars The Force Awakens, but he's certainly a major director in terms of getting results for a studio, which is why Disney wanted him. And we'll be talking about poor Universal and their Jurassic franchise with the second story. But Colin Trevorrow, you know, I think that I'm surprised. It's not like they want to replace him with somebody who's like really good, right? I mean, George Lucas, I think George Lucas is a great idea man. And I mean, just let's not forget, he not only came up with Star Wars, but he came up with Indiana Jones. And so I think that it's unfortunate Disney was just like, get out of here, take your $4 billion and go, which is not a bad parting gift. Golden parachute, so to speak. But I think that they are underestimating what George Lucas has to offer. And I'm sure he's very difficult. But you don't have to keep George Lucas around every day. You could have him come and visit once a month or every other month. Or just run the script by him and be like, what do you think, George? Because I think that, again, George Lucas, like many talented people in Hollywood, has great ideas, but left to his own devices with absolutely no supervision or editing, it's a disaster. But I mean, the same thing has happened to Christopher Nolan. It's happened to the Wachowskis. You know, giving somebody free reign is not always necessarily a good thing, particularly when it comes to movie making. So, you know, I think people are being particularly harsh with poor old George. But they're also being very harsh, I think, with Colin Trevorrow. But I guess because everybody's now starting to say replace him with George Lucas, which I guess to some degree, considering how much people dislike the prequels for the most part, is the ultimate insult. Colin Trevorrow is actually speaking quite a bit about Star Wars, you know, almost to the point where you're like, hey, you know, you're skipping Rian Johnson, right? Like, I know Rian Johnson's busy making episode 8, but if I were Lucasfilm, I'd be like, get out there, go talk to people, tweet something. You're not part of the conversation. And maybe he's like very antiquatedly like, I'll be part of the conversation when I make a good movie. And I'd be like, that's not the way the game is played anymore, Ryan. Get out there. But anyway, so Colin Trevorrow is talking about potentially him answering the question of who's Rey's lineage in episode 9, which is like really far away. But he's, you know, I think he's saying all the right things, but you know, of course, at the end of the day, it's how you execute. When what you actually, you know, actions speak louder than words, or movies speak louder than interviews. So we'll see, but I think it's an interesting situation. I think it speaks a lot to the way fandom affects movie going these days. I think it also talks to how tricky it is to navigate fandom as someone who's working in the business on fan favorite properties. And who would have ever thought that George Lucas would see the day that he would be once again favored by the fans? We'll see. On a side note, J.J. Abrams is going around saying, he did what he did in episode 7, I guess I just want to bring this in because I'm talking about results, but a couple of you have told me that, J.J. Abrams had a quote saying, we want to do something dangerous. We want to do something different and surprise people. And it's like, well, first of all, you didn't surprise a lot of fans who suspected it was coming, and we all saw it coming as soon as, the scene began. But also, as I tweeted back to someone in response, there are like a gabillion ways that you could have made Star Wars darker than what they did, and also that are far more original than what they did. Because I think what J.J. Abrams, he kind of owned up to it, but I think what he did was he said, I took the old formula so that nobody could really complain about it, and I used it to forward who's in Star Wars. Strong female character, strong black character, a Latino character with Oscar Isaac. I changed the demographics of Star Wars and who gets to play, and I made it so that no one could combat it because I used the same formula from Episode 4 that is universally loved. And when you look at it that way, that's pretty clever. And so we'll see what happens, and maybe that'll be the legacy of Episode 7. Time heals all wounds, and I think if 8 and 9, deviate from the course of 4, 5, and 6, we'll forget about that. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, I think it's very interesting what's going on over there, and it's a lot of moving parts in the Star Wars universe, particularly with their behind the camera talent. All right, so that's the first story of the day. And I'm curious, would you like to sign that petition? Have you signed that petition? And who would you go with if you were Disney? Colin Trevorrow or George Lucas? And do you think that Disney should have thrown George Lucas away? All right, so the second story of the day is that J.A. Bayona, as a number of you also tweeted me, he has had to drop out of World War Z 2, which is very unfortunate because I think a number of us are rooting for him. He's Guillermo del Toro's protege, very talented Mexican director. We're hoping for him to get to the next level. He directed The Orphanage. That's a Spanish language film. It's terrifying. It's really, really good. That and The Conjuring are two movies where I literally couldn't sleep after watching them. And he also did, of course, The Impossible. Very, very good movie. Excellent movie. If you haven't seen that movie, you should watch it. Now, he also has a Monster Calls coming out sometime this year with Felicity Jones and Liam Neeson, I believe Sigourney Weaver. I also think, I can't believe I forgot his name. He was Toby. See, this is what happens. You only do motion capture characters. Nobody can remember who you are. He's Dr. Doom, and he was the evil chimp in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So he needs to work on his publicity. But so that movie is somewhat anticipated. But apparently it needs more work, so that he's not going to be available to start shooting World War Z this spring, World War Z 2. So they have to go find somebody else. But the silver lining here. I mean, it's unfortunate. I think it's bad for J.A. Bayona. I think that he was a perfect fit with the property of World War Z 2. So I worry that how they're going to replace him and who they're going to replace him with, particularly on such short notice. Although it sure worked out for Gambit. Speaking of directors, they ended up with Doug Liman. That's like the best director all along, much better than Rupert Wyatt. Although that's a callback to the original, reboot of the Planet of the Apes. But this was a very good fit. So. And also I think it's very worrisome that Monster Calls needs so much more work. I'd be like, is it that bad? Maybe it's good you're not working on World War Z 2 because Brad Pitt's like, I can't go through the mess that was the first one again. We got to get it right the first time. You might recall Mark Forster made such a mess of that film, they had to reshoot the whole last third of the movie, which you can tell when you watch it, but I do like the last third quite a bit. I like that movie. I liked World War Z a lot, and so did many people. It made a lot of money. It's the most successful movie that Brad Pitt has ever made, and produced, by the way. But anyway, what's interesting, I said we were going to bring back the Jurassic World franchise, but Universal was interested in J.A. Bayona to direct Jurassic World 2. But he couldn't because he was going to do World War Z 2. But perhaps now he's available. And if you look at The Impossible, which takes place in a tropical setting, has some good family dynamics, which of course are very important to the Jurassic Park brand and the Jurassic brand, I think he would be a great fit with that as well. So if I were Universal, I'm sure they're already on the phone with his management team, his representation, trying to make that happen. He would be a wonderful choice, and he would therefore not lose too much ground, because that's another great franchise to be a part of. He's a wonderful, wonderful director. I mean, when you look at the people like they're hiring for Star Wars, like Gareth Edwards and Rian Johnson, Colin Trevorrow, with Jurassic World, J.A. Bayona should be in that group of hot intellectual directors. Well, some of them are pseudo-intellectual, but I digress. But moving up to the next level in terms of blockbusters. So he needs to get to catch up with the rest of the group. So that's the second story of the day. And I'm curious, what do you think? Do you worry about World War Z 2? Do you think J.A. Bayona dodged a bullet there? And if you were Universal, would you want him for Jurassic World 2? And have you seen either The Orphanage or The Impossible? Maybe you've seen both. And if you have, you're very lucky. All right, so let's talk about the third story of the day, which is the Directors Guild nominations. Now, a lot of people this is more important than the Golden Globes, because a lot of the people who vote for the DGA Awards, of course, vote in the Academy for the Oscars, because it's the same voting pool. So they have a very interesting situation. They have the people they nominated for Best Director, then they have a nice little category for First-Time Director. I think it's nice that they recognize that, and I think you're going to like who's on that list as well. But anyway, for the noms for the main award, this is Alejandro Inarritu for The Revenant. No surprise there. He has a ton of momentum now. Tom McCarthy for Spotlight. Adam McKay for The Big Short. Wow. Adam McKay's meteoric career rise over the last year has been shocking. First he had Ant-Man, now he has this Big Short success, at least of the award season. But who would have guessed Will Ferrell's creative partner would be so successful in the award circuit? I think whatever he does next, I think will be very exciting. Then George Miller for Mad Max. That's very sad, by the way. A number of you forwarded me a story from when he was on the Golden Globes red carpet, and he said, I'm not making any more Mad Max movies. I'm done. It's too much work. It's taken too much out of me, and I would suspect to some degree I'm sick of not being recognized for my work. It's also got to be incredibly demoralizing, as a number of people pointed out on Golden Globes night, that everyone's saying, oh, poor Inarritu, he had so many problems on the set of The Revenant, but yet George Miller had a ton of problems on the set of Mad Max. But, he decided to let the work speak for itself, whereas the narrative of what happened with the shooting of The Revenant is really driving that awards campaign. So, I mean, hindsight's 2020. I think perhaps they should have played up the difficulties a little bit more when campaigning for Mad Max. Maybe it would have helped. But I really liked what somebody said. I believe one of you actually tweeted this to me, and you said, Alejandro Inarritu created problems on the set of The Revenant, while George Miller solved problems on the set of The Revenant. Yet Inarritu is the one getting all the awards. I mean, I think that The Revenant definitely deserves to win for cinematography, or at least to be a strong contender. It's extremely well shot, but I don't think it's a particularly well crafted film in many ways, if you see my review. So I think Inarritu, dropped the ball the most out of anybody who worked on that project. More so than the actors, more so than the cinematographer. I mean, I think he was at fault there. So it's weird to see him, getting awards. Hopefully it ends with the Golden Globes, but we'll see. But then, of course, finally, Ridley Scott for The Martian. I think he did a masterful job directing that movie. It's extremely well put together, but I don't think it has a strong directorial voice, unlike, I would say, Mad Max or even The Big Short. So of this list of people, and I thought Spotlight was deeply flawed as well, even though it's an important story. So I think it should go to, I can't believe this, Adam McKay or George Miller. But I thought the Big Short was also flawed a little bit in its perspective. I just reviewed that earlier this week. So I really honestly do believe that Mad Max, George Miller deserves it for Mad Max. But anyway, on for First-Time Director, some interesting names on this list. Joel Edgerton for The Gift. That's very exciting for him. Alex Garland for Ex Machina. Of course, very, very popular screenwriter moving into directing. Aaron Sorkin's next, as we recently discussed. But it's nice for him to get that nod, and I think that's going to help both those guys secure more work. Now, how about a woman, right? Well, Marielle Heller, she also was nominated for Diary of a Teenage Girl, but nobody's really paid any attention to that movie, to the point where you're almost like, is this just a token nomination? Women really do need to work harder to get on the board. Direct something, Ava DuVernay. Although, congratulations to Ryan Coogler for Black Panther. We recently discussed that, back when I thought it was confirmed, but, apparently it was like pre-confirmed. They have to be careful. They leak these headlines so far in advance over at Marvel. They become rumors because they won't confirm it right away, but then how did you let it leak? And so that really sucks all the excitement out of the final confirmed announcement. The same thing happened with Benedict Cumberbatch in Doctor Strange, and they need to fix that because they're missing their big punch of press coverage because of it. And then also, the Son of Saul director, Laszlo Nemes, I think that's excellent that he got on the list as well. And that film's doing so well, it's impressive it's from a first-time director. So those are the DGA nominations. I'm curious, who are you rooting for? What do you think of the list? Was anyone left off that you feel should have been noticed? And what do you think of Joel Edgerton and Alex Garland? Do you think they are directors to watch? All right, let's get on to that viewer question, and that's the acquisition of Legendary by China's Dalian Wanda Group. This is a big deal. They purchased it late Monday night after I'd filmed Morning Movie News for the next day. I'm traveling over the holiday weekend. Actually, there will be no Morning Movie News again until Wednesday, or actually maybe even Thursday, because I'm coming back just in time to cover all that DC stuff they're dropping Tuesday night on the 19th. But anyway, they had this story break late in the day, and Legendary was purchased, not invested in. That's a very important distinction. All of these finance companies, and a lot of times these days, they're finance and production companies. That's what happened to Relativity, and there became a conflict of interest, a lot of studios felt, because they supply financing for some movies at studios that they are not actually producing, and that's actually gotten Legendary into trouble as well. So let's clarify that first. There are studios, and they need people to make movies for them and production companies, but they also need outside financing. For instance, Brett Ratner is a huge financier right now. Whenever you see the Rat Pack logo, it's because he and his finance group have paid for that movie. They're very big over at Warner Brothers. They get a lot of their money from the Rat Pack. It actually allowed them not to need Legendary anymore. So Legendary went over to Universal, and they give money for movies. For instance, they helped finance Jurassic World, although they had nothing to do with making Jurassic World. So it was very upsetting to Universal that they kind of tried to take credit for Jurassic World when they had no creative input on that film whatsoever. So it's a gray area, and I think studios need to maybe put their foot down and say, look, either you're a finance company or you're a production company. You can't be both. But anyway, with these companies, for instance, Jeff Robinov recently wanted to start one after he had to quit Warner Brothers because he wasn't promoted to Kevin Tsujihara's job. But anyway, he quit and he wanted to start his own finance production company. And he was supposed to get money from China, but it fell through. And it's actually used as an example of how don't count your Chinese chickens before they've hatched. But anyway, Legendary, so a lot of times you just get money from these companies. And it doesn't always have to be China. It can be the Middle East as well. But you get a ridiculous amount of money from usually a company or a single investor, and then you spend that money to make movies in Hollywood. For instance, there was recently a story about the Israeli, billionaire or millionaire who helped finance The Revenant, which was incredibly expensive. So anyway, this is not that situation. Dalian Wanda Group now owns Legendary. So when you go to an AMC theater, which is also owned by Dalian Wanda, by the way, and it's believed that the U.S. government will not feel that this is conflict of interest or, monopoly. But anyway, when you go to an AMC theater and you see a Legendary picture from now on, that night will have been brought to you courtesy of China. So it's very interesting to see China take such a big stake in Hollywood, literally. And it's also an impressive selling price. It's almost up there with what Disney paid for Pixar and then again later for Marvel. So that's very high evaluation. But I think that Legendary needed this because, as we all know from the summer, they're having major problems with Universal. Universal is upset with them for taking credit for movies, as we just discussed. They were very upset about Crimson Peak, saying this should be PG-13. And then, of course, Legendary wouldn't agree. And then, so as we discussed, Universal wouldn't pay for the movie, and Legendary ended up losing a lot of money. And of course, seeing the movie, it's pretty obvious that it should be PG-13. But anyway, I think they probably are very nervous about their relationship with Universal, and this gives them a little bit more security. So it's a very interesting development. It's interesting to see Hollywood diversifying, and also to seeing foreign companies and foreign players not just invest in Hollywood, but want a seat at the table. And it'll be interesting to see how this changes Legendary's slate. Let's not forget that Legendary is currently in the middle of, I think, post-production at this point, making a huge co-production with China called The Great Wall, which co-stars Matt Damon. And that is a film that's shot in China. It's a fantasy film that takes place at the Great Wall, obviously because of the name, but it's a very big deal. It has a Chinese director, Chinese co-star, and it's going to be a big deal when it hits theaters here in the United States. But the times, they are a-changing. Look for a video later this week, which will discuss that, as you will see. I don't want to give it away. I'm glad I'm able to do it a little bit early, so we'll just leave it at that. All right, so that's today's Morning Movie News. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer-requested story. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend if you're here in the United States. And if not, I just hope you have a nice weekend.